Good morning everybody, and welcome back to a brand new video. Now, for the last couple of years, if not longer, the economy has been in a bit of a decline. I've talked about it quite a bit on this channel, but today I wanted to have a look back specifically at what updates I think are most responsible looking back over the last 8 years. Since 2013, we have received a few questionable updates that have definitely had a long-term impact on the economy, mostly negative. Now, some of these have actually been changed or removed, but their impact is still felt today. So anyway, I hope you enjoyed the video. As always, if you do, always appreciate a like on the video. Helps it a lot, helps get my video out there. Thanks a lot as always, guys, and let's get started. Now, updates that mainly bring in new combat items such as the Nightmare, Theater of Blood, or the Chambers of Zara are usually decent for the economy as they aren't stacked with alchables, resource items, and stuff like that. Raids are usually pretty good. Now, speaking of raids, Raid Shadow Legend is the sponsor of today's video. If you somehow haven't heard of Raid, it's a massive turn-based fantasy RPG. At this point, it has over 600 champions for you to collect and level up. My current favorite one is Sir Nicholas, because apparently you can fight as literally Santa Claus, and it's kind of fun watching him disembowel people. There are also a ton of different boss fights, including a brand new boss called Sir Galaroth. He guards these powerful potions, and you kind of just have to beat him up over and over again. I feel bad for the guy. Raid also has a ton of new content being released, including a brand new update called the Doom Tower. In a Doom Tower, you can take on 2 new bosses, as well as explore new areas, discover new artifacts, as well as complete super raids for extra rewards. So if you want to give Raid Shadow Legends a try, check out the link in my description, or you can also just scan this convenient QR code on screen. New players are going to receive an epic hero, Chinoru, 200k silver, 1 XP boost, 1 energy refill, and an ancient shard. So thanks once again to Raid Shadow Legends for sponsoring today's video. Now, these are not in a particular order, however, the first thing I want to talk about is way back from 2016. Pretty much exactly 5 years ago today, we received an update called Superior Slayer Encounters. A fairly unassuming update, however, nestled in there at the bottom are some drop table improvements to some Slayer creatures. Monsters like the Gargoyle, the Necreals, the Dust Devils, Kurask, Scarabites, and Water Fiends received fairly notable drop table buffs. While it does have a lot of similar items on it, if we look at the pre-buff Gargoyle table, they dropped 3 unnoted steel bars, 3 unnoted mithril bars, 1 gold bar, 35 pure essence, some thread. Honestly, I think this is like the same drop table as Greater Demons, although it does have the uniques, of course. Now, after September 15th, they changed things up a lot. Not only did they buff up existing items like the mithril bar, the gold bar, and the steel bar, they made them noted, and they added an additional drop such as gold ore, the runite ore, and of course a ton of coins. Now, previously, not many players would actually kill gargoyles, but after the buff, gargoyles became one of the most popular money-making methods. So not only was the amount of resource items that each kill provided increased a ton, this also made gargoyles and all the rest of them way more popular. And that combined started to pump a ton of resource items into the game, and we can see just weeks after this update was implemented, most of those resource items started to fall in value. We had gold bars falling from about 200 GP in value down to 100 GP just in a few weeks. Mithril bars going from 1,200 each all the way down to 800 in the next few months. And that was the case across most of those items. And that was just gargoyles. They also made a fairly notable change to Necreals, adding in a ton of alchables and rune drops for Necreals specifically. Kurask went from dropping like 1 unnoted whiteberry, 2 limpet roots, a few bananas, some flax, and a few big bones, to all of a sudden dropping noted versions of that and in much larger quantities. Again, not only increasing the amount of drops that it provided, but also greatly increasing the popularity of the monster, which really increased the volume of items coming to the game tremendously. And while I think this update was fairly small in the grand scheme of things, it really set the precedent for Slayer drop tables, and I think it actually has had a fairly significant effect on why these resource items are so cheap today, even though this update wasn't a giant boss or anything like that. Okay, so we definitely cannot talk about updates that have ruined the economy without touching on Volcano. Now, Volcano is an update that came out in 2019 with the Prif Dinas update, and I would argue it was one of the worst updates for the economy. Volcano is a skilling boss, but on release and somewhat still today, it pumps out just ungodly amounts of resource items, specifically bars, ores, and runes. It's very easy content to complete, and although it does have fairly high requirements, it is still heavily botted and still a fairly insane moneymaker. Now, Volcano on release was pretty damn busted, and it has been nerfed since then. Here is the original drop table for Volcano. Just insane amounts of ore, and the only reason some of these still have value is because they are tied to alch value or shop value. Things that were critiqued specifically were the insane amounts of chaos runes that were dropped, up to 1300 per kill. There were also huge amounts of gold ore, mithril ore, and adamant ore. So they did eventually nerf things, including removing the chaos rune drop altogether, but did that help things at all? For example, here let's have a look at Chaos Runes. Since the inception of Old School, Chaos Runes have hovered around 100 GP forever, but as soon as the update came out in July of 2019, they crashed right down to 50 GP each, and although they tried to fix that by removing Chaos Runes from the drop table, this was definitely the initial push that caused Chaos Runes to go down to essentially bedrock. They can't go much lower than this because you can sell them to shops, and it's essentially the same as having an alch price on them. Another one is Mithril Ore, which at the time was worth around 175 each. As soon as the update came out, immediately dropped down to 100 each. And although they tried to fix it, it was the initial push that started the collapse of that item. Now, I single out these two items specifically for one reason, and that's because they are tied to another really important item, the Onyx. Now, Volcano is not only responsible for causing the crash of a ton of resource items, it's also the reason why uncut onyxes are worth so much less today than they were back in 2019. You can see this follows the exact same trend again, and that's because Chaos Runes and Mithril Ore are able to essentially be traded for onyxes in a somewhat roundabout way. In the Zara area, there's a shop that you can sell those two items specifically for Tockle, and you can use Tockle to buy an uncut onyx. So Volcano essentially crashed onyxes from 3 mil each down to 1.5 mil. And pretty much any item on that drop table has significantly crashed, and it's pretty obvious to see. If we go have a look at gold ore, look at that, it was 400 each before Volcano, and it just crashed immediately from all the items being put into the game. Now gold ore is worth 150 each, essentially making smithing like 4 times cheaper. Now obviously balancing drop tables is very hard. I'm more sympathetic about the Slayer drop table. I mean they were very underwhelming to kill for a high Slayer level monster. They needed something on their drop table to make them a bit more interesting, and I mean, you have to put something there, so they put some resource items and alchables. You know, I don't really have a better option for that, but Volcano just seems a little bit mismanaged. On release, Volcano just dropped so many of each item that they had to immediately axe the drop table. It just seemed a bit ill thought out, and I mean, you definitely can see the effect it has had on the economy over the last 2 years. Now, next to Brewer, of course, we have to talk about the Remnants. Now, Remnants is a hugely controversial update that was added back at the end of 2017, and it's a bit different than something like Volcano. Remnants were infamous for adding in a ton of straight cash and alchables, which is a little bit harder to track how that affected the economy. But on release, it was pretty bad. Not only did they drop tons of alchable items, they also dropped straight up huge amounts of cash in the form of emblems that you could cash in and convert them directly. For example, the Ancient Relic, if you got as a drop, was worth straight up 16 mil cash. And while those items still exist today, we have to keep in mind Remnants are much less lucrative, they're way slower to kill, and their drop table has been reworked quite a few times. Now, not only did Remnants drop huge amounts of straight cash, they were also very easy to access. There were no requirements to kill Remnants. You just needed a strong enough account, and they were all very close together, making them a really lucrative money-making method for all sorts of people, including bots. Of course, the trade-off was meant to be that they were in the wilderness, but regardless, they continued to be farmed extremely heavily. And because Remnants mainly drop straight cash, the impact is a bit harder to determine. The main thing it will have caused is gold inflation, which essentially means their buying power would be going down because there's just a ton more gold being printed into the game via Remnants. And while this is not felt as directly by players, I think there's no doubt that Remnants inflated the gold prices significantly, at least until they were nerfed. Now, next up here, we of course have to talk about Zara. Now, Zara has been in the game for so long now. It was one of the first new pieces of content to be added to Oldschool Runescape, and really was one of the first instances of one of these overloaded drop tables, just offering a whole host of important items and dropped in huge quantities. We have Law Runes, Death Runes, Chaos Runes, Black Dragonhide, Magic Logs, Coal, Torsal, Magic Seeds, Dragon Bones, Grapes, Raw Shark, Mahogany Planks. Like, it has so many important items on it. And while there are potentially more overloaded drop tables today, Zara was realistically one of the first. Now, one thing I find a bit interesting about Zara is if you go look at the item prices over time, they don't look that bad. For example, looking at grapes, grapes had actually gone up in value for a significant amount of time, even after the addition of Zara. And that's reflected in many of their drops, and I think that mainly has to do with, one, gold being worth a lot less over time, so naturally price inflation kept things relatively even, as well as Oldschool Runescape has grown immensely since the addition of Zara, and there has been a ton of new players coming in, adding significant demand to meet all of the supply being added by Zara. The drop table for Zara has been changed many times, and has been one of the most consistently farmed bosses for one of the longest periods of time, and while it's a little bit less visible than other items, it's a large part of the reason as to why Flax is worthless, Snakeskin is worthless, Pure Essence is worth 1 GP. It's been labeled the money snake, and it's not hard to know why. Now, the final point I want to touch on here is a bit different. The fifth update that I think has had one of the most negative effects on the economy is actually Twitch Prime. While not a content update, it has made the jobs of bots significantly easier by offering free membership for a limited time for sure, but making it extremely easy to access through Amazon Prime. Whenever these Prime events run, you can just tell. Immediately, many heavily botted items just drop immensely. Luckily, these don't happen as frequently anymore, but whenever one of those Twitch Prime promotions comes around, you can pretty much be assured that Dragon Bones, Green Dragonhide, bowstrings, cannonballs, all that stuff is just gonna tank from the absolute massive influx of bots. Anyway guys, that's gonna be it for today's video. I think those are the 5 updates that really ruined the Oldschool Runescape economy. Obviously there are others, but well, those are my top 5. Thanks for watching guys, as always, and I will see you next time. Now before I go here guys, I want to give a massive thank you to all of my members over on YouTube. Thank you so much to The Hybrid, Guy Fox, Timothy Chen, Ocelot, and Kush Patel for all being subscribed at the Dragon tier. You guys are awesome. Thank you guys as always. Also a big shout out to Base Titch, Mexos, NDM001, and YoYoSup89. Appreciate it as always. If you guys are looking for another way to support the channel, becoming a YouTube member is an awesome way to do so. Helps directly fund me, of course. If you become a member, you can become immortalized in all of my future videos, get access to a video release schedule, and of course get a custom role in my Discord server. Thanks a lot guys, and I'll see you next time.